Cosatu says government's plan to offer voluntary early retirement to civil servants and replace them with younger ones would lead to a brain drain in the public sector. It comes after Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana announced plans to reduce the public sector wage bill over the next 2 years by targeting 30,000 workers. The Labour Federation's parliamentary coordinator, Matthew Parks, joins us now for more on that. Matthew, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. It's not the first time that this is being done. If I'm correct, it might be the second time, but certainly I know in 2019, for about 6 months, an opportunity was opened for early retirement for public servants between the ages of 55 and 60. Was there a huge take-up of that, and did it have a significant impact?
Good evening, thanks for having us. There's been various incarnations of this over recently, as you mentioned. A couple of years ago, government had actually made similar offers to also about 30,000 public servants, and only about 2,000 took it up. The reason being is that most workers are highly indebted. And when you go from earning a salary to your pension, even if there's the no penalties rule applied, where you don't get disadvantaged because of less years of service, which government offered then is, and I think would offer now as well. The difficulty is that when you're in a salary, you're at 100%. When you go to pension, you go to a percentage of a salary. And when you're still having to pay bills to settle your home loan, to take care of dependents, relatives who don't have jobs, children, grandchildren, etc., it's not an easy thing for most persons. So the few who will take it up are those who really don't have any debts, who are not having relatives who are unemployed, etc. So that's the one issue that we are doubtful that this will achieve what government hopes to achieve. And look, we appreciate that government fiscus is under severe pressure. There's many competing, equally legitimate demands, but we're not sure if this really is the right medicine for the crisis facing government and facing the economy at large.
Well, I suppose the big question is what the government is raising here, that the wage bill in South Africa is if not the second highest compared to what other countries like Iceland and so forth are currently paying. I mean, what do you make of that particular conclusion that they would have raised?
Yeah, so I think I'm glad you're mentioning Iceland. I don't think we can compare South Africa to Iceland. Iceland is a country of 500,000 people. It doesn't have the severe socio-economic crisis we have. It doesn't have the history of apartheid, etc. But I think let's look at government's figures. So is the public sector bloated, as many people would say? And, in 1994, we had 34 million citizens. We had about 1 million public servants, just over. Today, the population has nearly doubled 30 years later to 64 million South Africans. And the public service headcount has barely grown to 1.2 million. And in fact, in many departments, like Home Affairs, there are huge amounts of vacancies. And this results in long queues. We've seen, because of the freeze on vacancies, the ratio of teachers, of nurses, to learners, to patients rising at very high rates. We've seen over the last decade the police service headcount declining by 15%. So population is growing, the public service isn't growing. People might say the wage bill is the issue, it's out of control, they would say. But if you look at the budget itself, the wage bill has been stable at 35% of the budget, so that's in line with international norms, and in fact within all workplaces norms, that your largest expenditure item is always your personal, your most important asset. But anyway, since 2008, the wage bill has been stable at 35% of the budget. It's not gone up much, it's not gone down much. But in the last 2 years, it's decreased from 35 to 31%. So in other words, basically a 10% reduction in the wage bill as a portion of the budget. So the crisis is not about a ballooning wage bill. In fact, the crisis is now the reverse. It's about a shrinking wage bill, about a public service wage bill that's under severe pressure. And the consequence is that, yes, it's easy for a government to reduce the wage bill. It's simply a question of not paying workers more, not giving them increases. But the consequence of that is that you spark a brain drain of skilled professionals from the state, the skills that we require to deliver the quality public services that workers, the society, that the economy and businesses depend upon. So if you continue to squeeze nurses, doctors, paramedics, teachers, police officers, other skilled professionals who make up the bulk of the public service, what you'll find that they will go to better paying jobs, far less stressful, in the private sector or overseas. So that further decapacitates the stability of the state to provide quality public services. It also means the state loses huge investments that it is spent on training and on educating these public servants. And of course, it makes its capacity to turn the economy around even worse. So I think for us, the issue is not to look for shortcuts of squeezing the public service, but rather to grow the economy, to remove obstacles to its growth, to invest in the quality public service that the economy requires to grow, and to make sure we reduce unemployment, because there's no amount of cutting the wage bill or cutting the public service that is going to resolve those fundamental issues. We don't have a crisis of debt or of expenditure. We have a crisis of growth and of revenue. And I think for us, we need to do the hard issues and not simply look for easy shortcuts.
Yeah. Taming the public sector wage bill is one, but introducing young workers is another reason that they're using. And what particularly struck me was them saying that they will now be able to, for example, harness their digital infrastructure to be able to roll out critical systems in the provision of service delivery. For example, in the following focus areas: digitizing and simplifying the application and the disbursement process of social grant, broadening access to employment pathways, rolling out digital identification documents, and so on and so forth. So say, well, remove a lot of people, you're able to digitize, I suppose, these functions, but also get an opportunity to introduce some young people into the system.
So you don't need to remove anybody to digitize. Workers have long asked for the IT systems of the state to be fixed, or for Home Affairs IT systems, which is the cause of half of the crisis at Home Affairs, to be overhauled, to be modernized. The other solution to fixing Home Affairs, for example, is actually to fill vacancies. So you do those two things, but simply saying that Thabo is a little bit too old and bring a younger Thabo to replace him, not necessarily going to resolve the issue. Similarly, we don't need to lower the headcount of the police service. We need to digitize, to put in place modern computers and modern IT systems at the police stations, so the dockets are linked to the forensic database, etc. Similarly, at hospitals across the state. But I think we are also fearful that a lot of these skills of public servants have been built over many, many years, and we should be careful of simply tossing them out the window because we're trying to look for another solution. In the Mandela administration, teachers were offered voluntary severance packages, and later on, government regretted it badly. They lost a lot of skills because those who often take the packages are those who have got skills, who can easily go to the private sector or come back as consultants, as it often happens. And you end up really cutting your nose to spite your face. The late Minister for Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, spent a lot of time over the past few years trying to help Eskom and Transnet and Denel to win back skilled employees who had left to greener pastures overseas in the private sector. About 3 weeks ago, the police service put out a big advert asking former police officers to rejoin the police service as well, because the skills are in high demand. So again, we're worried about government not learning the lessons of the past and the mistakes of the past and actually seeking possibly to repeat them. But I think for us, look, we want to see the state working. And if you look at the example of the South African Revenue Service, it provides a roadmap to rebuilding the state in a smart way. Appoint competent management, remove corrupt and criminal elements, fill critical frontline vacancies, not bloated management vacancies, but actual foot soldiers who deliver public services. Invest in the capacity of the institution, whether it's infrastructure or IT, etc., or the training of staff. And you can see in SARS, they've done a remarkable turnaround in the past 2 years when they previously were part of the state capture project. They've increased tax compliance from 61 to 64%, and that has brought an additional 60 billion rand in revenue to the state, far above the few million rand spent on filling some vacancies. So if we can apply that same model to Home Affairs, reduce the queues where workers might spend 6 days queuing for ID documents and thus losing wages and disrupting workplace productivity. Digitize it, yes, but also fill the vacancies too, remove the corrupt elements. So then you can have a quality Home Affairs. Similarly, if you can apply that to the police, to clinics, to hospitals, to the whole spectrum of public services, that will have a beneficial impact to the economy, which will see greater tax revenues being generated by profitable businesses, by workers and jobs, etc., than the few million rands you'll spend fixing the state. So I think for us, we've been kicking the can down the road for so long, we actually need to now deal with the fundamental crisis and not simply just continue to look for shortcuts. But I think that if government is really keen upon seeing old people retire, let's first try it out with cabinet. Let's see if we can have politicians who are above the age of 65 calling it a day, going home to play with grandchildren as they should be doing. Let's bring younger people into cabinet, into parliament, legislatures, the councils too. But let's start there, as opposed to looking at nurses and doctors who have built up decades of practical and valuable experience and simply thinking that we could do without those skills.
Yeah. Matthew Parks, appreciate your time. Let's leave you there. That's Matthew Parks, parliamentary coordinator there for Cosatu. Right, let's take a break. When we return, what's making news tonight here on In Focus? Do stay with us.